we're gonna be calling Shanon high.
Downey, this is your teammate. Please meet us at Dairy Queen. We miss you, Downey. Please. Please come home, Downey.
My name is Shanon High, and I'm ready to be your junior
That should be
class
good.
president.
So, welcome back. Another episode of the Shanon Show. Today's guest is the man behind Stephen Gregg. It is Dane Brennan. He is on the show. How you doing, man?
Pretty good. Thanks for inviting me on the show.
Yeah, very exciting. You know, I love talking to people, especially I've just heard like bits and pieces of stuff you've been doing, and we just talked like very briefly before the show.
Mhm.
But just tell me a little bit about what you've been up to as of recent.
As of recent, how recent are we
Yeah.
talking? Just like in the last few months or what?
Yeah, sure. Like since let's just say 2021. This year, how's it going this year for
2021?
you? Yeah.
This year's been off to a very interesting start. So, let me think about some major events. I mean, other than just trying to survive, I mean, I'm currently at school. I have been, well, for the past year now, and I'm going to be taking a break here soon. So, but since like January of this year, I mean, I'm dating this amazing girl. Her name is Maddie. We've known each other for about a year now.
Right.
We didn't start dating until recently. I mean, but that's just like, simple information. That's just, what I got going on. That's fairly new. Yeah, I got a job I really enjoy. I'm working for my university. My job is pretty cool because I work with well, it's kind of hard to describe. Like the best way I can describe it is like I help students with what's called exceptions. So like let's say like I don't know, just like as a hypothetical. Let's say like you're a student at my school and like last year you got super sick and like something happened that was entirely out of your control. And there was no way that you could have like changed the course of your grade because your circumstance just didn't allow for it. And so you call me up and you tell me about what happened and how you just had just like the wrong deck of cards handed to you, and I'm able to help that student or whoever's calling to figure out how to get what's called like an exception so we can maybe fix their grade. So it requires lots of diplomacy in terms of like, because like a lot of students deal with like these really complicated issues, like where like like they go through really rough things, like family deaths or even just like like lots of mental health. And so they call me up looking for some sort of way to like fix their to fix something that happened. And it's it's a lot of responsibility on me, but I really enjoy the job because it puts me in a position where I really need to know how to communicate and help people to like really like resolve their problems in the best way possible. So that's kind of what I've been doing since 2021 started, just working, spending time with my girlfriend, things like that. Simple things, the things that I've always kind of wanted to do.
Yeah, that sounds like some pretty important stuff in terms of your job. I've never heard of anyone being in that position before. Do you know if that's like a fairly common thing amongst
It
amongst, like,
isn't. It isn't though.
universities?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, it really isn't. So as far as I know, every university department in every university, like nationwide, like whether you're talking about like the accounting office or like the financial aid office or admissions or whatever it may be, every office has what's called a petitions office, where like, and I know, for example, like, let's say something happened and like, I know for a lot of universities, like if you want to like drop a course at a certain period in the semester, you need to pay for the course again.
yeah.
And sometimes there are circumstances that happen where like like that fee to have to pay for the course should be waived based off of like what you went through. And so you can call you can call it the accounting office and get some sort of waiver, or file some sort of petition to not have to pay. But that being said, like only like I mean, especially at my university, there are only like it's me and two other people who do what I do for my office.
Wow.
So it's definitely like a hyper specialized kind of thing, where like we need to be familiar with not only like the school's policy, but also a lot of legal policy too. There's a lot of different laws and regulations that like are actual federal laws that I need to be aware of before I can ask for information or give out information and things like that. And so that's why they pay me the big bucks. But I really enjoy it. It reminds me a lot of like how like actual attorneys work.
Yeah, that's what it
Because you
sounds
have like
like.
clientele. Yeah, you have clientele who go to attorneys for some sort of issue, and the attorney is responsible to know like what they're working with, like with like like their client situation, what the law lets them do, and then how to kind of navigate around it. And that's like I mean honestly, like at the end of the day, like that's really what I'm working with. I have to pay attention to our policies and then the law that dictates what I can and cannot do. you know?
So is this what you want to do in the future though? What's your major
Well,
looking like?
I feel like it's a great segue into what I want to do in the future. So my major right now is international studies, and then I'm
Yeah.
getting a minor in Russian and Slavic studies. Um, and so what I want to do for a future occupation is pretty simple. In terms of the actual title, it's just I want to get into diplomacy. So I wanna work in embassies. The actual official title is called a foreign service officer. And so as far as I know, and I'm not really sure of the specifics of how this works, but I've been told that I don't need an actual college degree. But that being said, I'm going to get one anyways, just as a safety net.
Sure.
The way to get into this field of work is you need to take what's called the foreign service exam, which is the super large comprehensive exam that's it's like 7 parts or something that spans over the course of 6 or 7 months. And it's like a really immersive exam. It's one of the most competitive exams you can take in the US for any government agency. But if I'm in, then I'll be doing diplomatic work in different embassies all over the world for the rest of my career.
That
And
sounds
that's kind of
awesome.
what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the work I'll be doing is probably very similar, where I'll be dealing with individuals and individual concerns, and I'll have to work with the laws that the land allow me to work with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that being said, I've never worked in that field before, so I don't really know the actual specifics, but I know enough about it that I'm interested, and I wanna try, at least to get in.
Yeah. So you're
yeah,
going to be
that's
doing
kinda what
a
I'm
lot
going
of
for.
traveling in your future, it sounds like, especially in that field.
I plan on it, yeah. I plan on it for sure.
Which makes sense because you've done a lot already, and that's what I want to kind of get into next. Is I met you at Kubasaki,
Oh,
obviously.
sure, for sure.
Well, we can talk about Kubasaki just a little bit right now. We can get into it more later. But
All right.
Kubasaki, looking back on it from your perspective, how do you view your time there?
I loved Kubasaki. So pretty much all of my early academic life, I just kind of messed around and I didn't really focus. It wasn't until Kubasaki that I really got my stuff together and really
Yeah.
buckled down and started focusing on my education. And I really enjoyed. I was at Kubasaki for my junior and my senior year. And if you have any foreign listeners, that's just 11th and 12th grade. Um, and I really enjoyed my time there because I really worked hard to improve my overall academic success and really make sure that my GPA was up. But I got involved in a lot of things that I never got involved in before, like up until that time. I did a lot of theater, which is where I met you, right? And I really
Obviously.
enjoyed it. Theater helped with my public speaking a lot.
Yeah.
I'm grateful I did because public speaking is a large part of what I do now, and just speaking in general and communications. I got involved in the debate team, which was called Model Congress, and I didn't think I would, even I never thought I would actually ever do something like that. But I ended up excelling at it, and I was the president of that club, and I really loved it. And it taught me a lot about current events and geopolitics, which I just found myself really interested in, even now.
Yeah.
So I feel like Kubasaki was, at least, I mean, even though it was only 2 years of my high school career, it was I feel like those 2 years gave me so much in terms of realization into what I actually enjoyed doing and what I wanted to pursue as a future career.
Yeah. So what flipped the switch for you then? Because you said you weren't too into your
Yeah.
academics. So once you got there, what was the difference?
I don't know. So I had a knee injury my freshman year that really made things difficult my sophomore year of high school. And I was really into doing sports. And I realized pretty soon after that I wasn't going to be able to continue doing anything athletic because of that. And so, I went to this new school in this new environment, and I just thought, well, I have a perfect opportunity to just try something entirely different and see if I like it. Because I knew I wasn't going to be at Kubasaki long. And so I was like, well, I mean, if there are things offered, why not give it a shot? And I guess that was just kind of my mindset. It was like, well, why not send it? I tried track and field too, just I tried a bunch of things, everything that potentially piqued my interest. And a couple of things stuck and a couple of things didn't, which is chill. But I guess I mean, looking back on it, I just kind of considered myself in a position where I was in a new environment. I had a lot that I could do and a lot that I used to do but I couldn't do anymore. So I'm like, well, I might as well go find something new. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's an awesome way to get acclimated to a new environment. Absolutely, just
Yeah.
trying a bunch of things and going for it. I think
Right.
that's a great
Yeah.
message for a lot of people.
And sometimes things stick and like you enjoy them, and sometimes
Yeah.
you don't. But like you don't know if you enjoy something until. Oh, that's kind of how that started. And overall, I really enjoyed my time at Kubi. It was a great school. I mean, I have really fond memories of Kubasaki in general.
Yeah,
I just think
absolutely.
it
Me
was a
too.
very like
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like it was a very relaxed environment. You know, I mean, like I enjoyed both my high schools because I went to two of them, but
Mhm.
Kubi I'd say was like one of my favorites for sure.
So you do graduate from Kubasaki, your senior year. That I always thought that was
Yeah,
awesome. I wish I could have graduated there. It was just it's such a small community. It seems like a pretty
yeah,
special occasion.
yeah. It
But
was.
you end up going to Slovakia. I'll let you take over from here because I don't know too much about
Yeah.
what you're doing.
So
Please. Yeah.
just in a nutshell. So I mean, I was debating doing this for a long time, and just kind of as like a preface to what I'll say, and a lot of I mean, if anybody is listening, like we'll
Sure.
probably get an idea as to what's going on. So I went on this 2-year mission from my church. Just as a quick nutshell to what I'm about to say, just kind of help you understand. And I always knew that like this missionary service was optional, and
Yeah.
I could have chosen not to, or I could have chosen, you know, and I obviously chose to go. But I kind of wrestled with the idea of it because when you apply for this missionary service, you don't get to choose where you go.
Oh wow. Jeez.
That's decided for you.
That's
And I
crazy.
mean, you can I mean, if you want to, I could show you later, like the actual like church website. You can see a list of all the potential missions that you could go to. And certain countries have like multiple missions.
Yeah.
And it's a 2-year like full-time service where like my entire life for 2 years is missionary work. And so essentially like um I don't have weekends off. I mean, I'm not gonna like watch TV. Like my time out there
Yeah.
for 2 years is dedicated to my service to other people. And now obviously that's, you know, quite deterring for some because they're like, what the heck? Like I'm gonna go spend 2 years of my
It's a
life,
long time.
you know, it's a long time. And there are a lot of restrictions as to what you can do, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so you're pretty much just turning yourself around 100%. And so that was like a huge part of like the whole debate was like, well, do I really want to, you know, like put myself in a position where I'm gonna just, you know, dedicate myself 2 years to missionary work and then potentially, you know, put myself out there and get somewhere where I'm like, I don't really want to go there. You know what
Hmm.
I mean?
Yeah.
But I guess at the end of the day, I was like, you know what, screw it. Like let's do it. Because what it came down to was I recognized that, you know, I've really benefited from like what my church has offered me growing up. I come from a really good home, and I know that there are people out there that would really like opportunities like I had.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it was like, well, if I can be put in a position that can give me some experience, at least overseas or somewhere where I can help other people in their circumstances with what I can, with, you know, with what I have, with what I've been given, then why not, right? So like that,
Yeah.
okay, like let's do it. So I started the process for filing out my papers, and you know, I had to get approved from not only the U.S. government but also the Japanese government, because there was a potential that I would go international, which ended up happening. And so I think it was in May of like 2017, that I get this package, or I get this like letter back from my church. It's an official letter signed by like our church's, what it's called the First Presidency. They're just kind of in charge of
Yeah.
it all. And it kind of outlines where I'm going and what language I'm supposed to be learning.
Wow.
And when you get that letter, it's super nerve-wracking because you're not entirely certain like what's going to be in it, you know?
Yeah.
Like
I can imagine.
I could have
Can you
gone to
decline
Kenya.
at this point?
You can, yeah, you can. You can decline up until a certain point. But you know, once you go, you go. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I could have gotten, you know, friggin' Madagascar or like, you know, Hong
Yeah.
Kong or
Was there
Kenya.
anything you were hoping for?
I was hoping for Europe.
Yeah.
At least, I mean, I was studying Russian in high school on my own, and I really enjoyed like Russian culture. But I didn't get Russia. So
Yeah.
so the
I
name,
remember you speaking Russian.
yeah. So like the name of my mission was called the Czech-Slovak mission.
Okay.
And it was just it was two countries. It was the Czech Republic and Slovakia. Now when I got my mission letter, I was kind of confused because I didn't know much about that part of the world.
Yeah.
And so I thought, because like basically what it said was you know, I was called to serve in the Czech-Slovak mission, and that the actual language I was to learn or supposed to speak out there was Slovak, the language of Slovakia. But what I didn't know at the time was that Slovak, what you know, I thought that Slovak was spoken in the Czech Republic. I didn't actually know that Slovakia was a country.
Oh.
That's where I was called to, like like primarily, like that was like my actual location.
Yeah.
And so basically what happens is like naturally I got my letter and I was like, oh cool, okay, yeah, like this is interesting, like yeah, okay, I'll go out there, like I've never been there before and that sounds like a great experience.
Hmm.
So when it's time to leave, I left in July. I headed to an area in Provo, Utah, where I basically learned the language for about 9 weeks. I learned like
Wow.
all the fundamentals of Slovak from people who were missionaries there once upon a time.
Yeah.
They're all Americans, but they all spoke Slovak great. And so I learned like the fundamentals of the language. And then I think it was September of 2017, I'm flown out from Salt Lake City I go from Salt Lake to Frankfurt, from Frankfurt to Prague, and then I take like a 10-hour train to an area called Nitra, which is a tiny Slovak town. And I'm just in this town for like 4 months or so, for the first 4 months of my time there.
Yeah.
And every couple of months you move to different cities. So I was in a town called Nitra for 4 months, and you're just thrown into the water. Like you're just
Yeah. So
expected to
real
get out
quick,
there
like
and speak to people.
what's your gut reaction? Like you land, you get on this train. What are you thinking? Like, is there any like regret? Is there any like surreal
boy.
feeling? And like,
I was experienced culture shock.
yeah.
But like being out there, it's not like anywhere I've ever been before. Like Slovakia is a fairly poor former communist country.
Okay.
And so just like the overall like social culture, like the mindset, like the way it all looks, it's just very backwards and different compared to where I come from. So I was completely out of my element. I mean, I have never been that out of my element before. Because I consider myself fairly capable when it comes to traveling, but when I was there in the environment that I was in, it was just very different for me. So yeah, that was definitely a culture shock to say the least. But as I was saying, like you're in these different towns every couple of months, and you'll move depending on wherever like your actual mission president wants you to go to.
Yeah.
And so I was in for the first 4 months, I was in a town called Nitra, which is southwest Slovakia. It's bordering Hungary. I don't know if you're looking at a map, but I mean, you can kind of see where these places are. Then I moved, I took a 10-hour bus 4 months later to a town called Košice, which is on the east bordering Ukraine. Then I went all the way back across the country to the capital city of Bratislava, Slovakia. And then I spent 4 months in the Czech Republic in a town called Brno. And that's northeast Czech Republic. That borders Slovakia to the west. And then and then my last area for the last 4 months of my mission was spent in a town called Žilina. And so to give you an idea as to the kind of work I would do is I would just I mean, so other than I mean a lot of what I did was I would teach individuals who were interested in what we were as a church and kind of like what we stood for. And so people would oftentimes like we would do our fair share of looking for people who would potentially be interested in, but people would reach out to us or contact us on the streets and be like, hey, like what are you guys, like what do you do? And we'd explain like where we're from and like how our purpose was to just kind of teach like the principles of like our church to those who wanted to learn about them, and so whenever people had interest, we would just kind of meet up with them and wherever they were comfortable, and we would just kind of let them know like, hey, like this is what we do, like this is what we believe, and we kind of help them understand like kind of like what we're all about. But a majority of my mission, as I said, was spent doing humanitarian work. For people who come from very, very low income housing or just had no homes at all. Because
so did you sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
Oh no, so I was just wondering, did you feel well prepared whenever you got there, or did you feel that you were still lacking in some sense? You say you spent 9 weeks learning the language, or I just can't imagine being prepared for this situation.
I felt well prepared enough to a point where I could get by with like the basics of the language, but when it came to understanding like the whole social culture of the people, that I was totally unprepared for that.
Okay.
But luckily enough, so I was always with another person who was more experienced.
Okay.
So when I get there, so I basically like I'm living with a roommate, and him and I do everything together, right? They call it a companion. So essentially, I'm with this guy, and he knows a lot more than I do about like the language and the culture, and he's already been there before me for sometimes. He knows the area at least. So for the first couple of weeks I was there, I would just kind of follow him around until eventually I got comfortable enough with my environment to be able to do things on my own and help whoever is with me. So it kind of like flips at one point where I'm the more experienced one as opposed to the underexperienced one. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So do more people come in to the area that are doing the same thing as you, and you become like that mentor all of a sudden?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like over time, like, you know, if
Mhm.
I mean, like, it came to a point where I was there for a year, and so by that point, I was already really familiar with, like, you know, with like the people, the language,
Yeah.
the area, and so you know, somebody comes to me, I'm paired with somebody else, and I'm able to help them, you know, navigate around and figure themselves out, and I'm already established and comfortable, and I'm helping them to get there too.
Yeah. So what work specifically are you doing? You're talking about the humanitarian work.
Yeah, so a lot of humanitarian work I did, which I really enjoyed doing, which also really helped me understand like what I want to do for a future career. One thing that I can think about specifically is, so we have these well, we call them senior missionaries. They're married couples in their 60s and 70s that are also volunteers, because like none of
Wow.
us get paid for any of this. None of us get
Yeah.
paid for this. They're also volunteers. They don't speak the language. They're not required to, but they are like, for example, like the two that I would work with most often, they were the Schultzes, the, like, you know, the Schultz,
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Schultz. They were from Nevada, and they didn't speak any Slovak or Czech, but their job as humanitarian missionaries was to work with local governments to
Yeah.
help a group of people, um, known as the Romani, or also known as the Gypsies, in certain parts of East Slovakia, to, for example, get running water or electricity, or to, you know, help local governments to supply them with better housing. And so that was kind of like a majority of what we do. So I remember moments where we would meet with local government officials from Slovakia in different villages or whatever we were in,
Yeah.
and we would be in these big old board meetings, and they would be the ones who would kind of, you know, introduce ideas and concepts that the church could help, you know, provide financially, you know, and then the government
Yeah.
would be able to respond with, and we basically just made deals back and forth about, okay, like, what can we contribute and how can we work together to figure out a good situation for these people. But those meetings needed to be translated, so I would literally interpret live, from English to
Wow.
Slovak, or
Yeah.
from Slovak to English, back and forth. And we're talking like government, like we're talking like official, like very very important, you know, and then like the word choice was very important, when it came to like translating back and forth, because the other, you know, like
Yeah.
you know, like basically like, the group, or like the meeting, needed to understand what was being said and like what was being agreed on. And we're talking financial, we're talking like, you know, like legal speak. And so I needed to really improve my vocabulary, which is super cool, because I would
Yeah. I'm
spend my
sure.
time studying, like, you know, like official words, and like a bunch of other things that would be, you know, that would be potentially helpful to translate like an official government meeting. And so
Did
that
you
was really fun.
ever did you ever like completely mess something up? Like you just like butcher
Oh,
a
all the
translation?
time, all the time. Yeah, all the time. I would butcher things all the time, and then like I had to stop and think and be like, all right, sorry, like 1 second, like I need to figure out how I'm supposed to say this correctly.
Yeah.
And there are many times where like I'm like, I don't know how to say that word, but like I'm gonna do my best to translate like the overall meaning,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, like interpretation, if you don't have any script to follow, you just got to figure out the best way to translate the meaning in order to get, you know, like
Yeah.
you know, the idea across, as opposed to focusing too much on the actual word choice. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? So that's
So
kind of what I did for a long time.
did you develop sort of a routine while you were there? Like every day kind of had its own layout that you
Yeah.
became accustomed to?
Yeah, so every day was fairly different. We would wake up and do like a couple of different things. Like we'd work out, but then at around 9 a.m. every day, me and my companion, or whoever I was living with at the time, we would sit down and we would plan out our day.
Yeah.
To like the actual minute. Like we would kind of like go through and say, okay, like what are we looking to accomplish today? Like what are our goals?
Hmm.
And then we would kind of say, okay, like we're gonna be here, you know, like we have a lesson with this homie at like 6, you know what I mean? Like we're gonna have
Yeah.
lunch at this time. And so every day was fairly different based off of what we had planned on previously. I typically did my translations on Saturdays. But like throughout the week, we would just kind of teach people in our own town where we were living, and kind of do things like that. And occasionally we had activities. I would teach English a lot too. I would teach English
Yeah.
every Wednesday. We would play games with people every Tuesday, and so it just kind of depended on the day. But we would plan them out every day.
What's it like teaching English to someone? I always hear like English is so hard to learn, so hard to learn. Is it difficult
English
to
is really
teach?
difficult. See, here's the thing. If you understand the language, if you understand English and like the way it works and like all the parts of speech,
Hmm.
and then you also understand like the language you're teaching in, it's not that hard. And like the reason why I say that is because like personally, like I really like languages, and like I don't have I don't have like a hard time learning them. So when I was teaching English, I was teaching it from Slovak to English. And at that point in time, I had a really good understanding as to how Slovak worked,
Yeah.
and I really understood like how Slovaks thought, and like like how and like the way we speak is largely due in part to the way we think. And so I understood like the Slovak mindset, and so I was able to explain English concepts in a way that made sense to like the average Slovak brain,
Yeah.
and that's kind of
That's
what I did. But
so interesting. Yeah.
yeah, I didn't really have lesson plans. I would just get up there, and whatever they wanted to discuss, we would just kind of get into, and I would just kind of make it up on the go, you know?
Yeah.
Because the best way to learn is to just get thrown into the fire, in my opinion, and just practice conversations on random everyday topics, you know?
Okay. Yeah. So
Because like yeah.
what was your housing situation like, or where were you living? And then is the area in general, I'm trying to like just to paint a picture, is it very rural?
Some parts are rural. Like
Yeah.
some towns were rural, and some towns were more urban.
Yeah.
So let me think. My first town of Nitra, that was rural. That was about
Yeah.
60,000 people. I lived
Okay.
in a small apartment complex on the outskirts of the city to the south, in an area called Hrenova. And it was just like a small apartment complex, but there were still quite a few apartments in that area. But it's largely a farming town. When I
Yeah.
lived in the capital city, I lived in a high rise on the outskirts of the city, in an area called Dubravka. And there were tons of apartments there. I mean, it was a very
Yeah.
urban location, so it just depended on like the. But yeah, there's only like two major Slovak towns, and everything else are just small little. I mean, honestly, just small little villages. To be honest with you.
Yeah. So is there anything like overarching, I guess, things that you learned while you were there? Like looking back on the entire time you were there,
Yes.
any lessons
Yeah.
or things? Yeah, please.
Yes.
Great to share.
One huge lesson that I learned. So, and I'll kind of explain it like this. When I was in high school, I mean, like especially like my last 2 years of high school, I found lots of success by doing things for myself. Like
Yeah.
I would do like clubs and stuff for my own benefit, and I would pass my own tests and do my own homework. And so that was kind of how I understood and measured success, as if I did something for myself. When I went and I started doing things for other people and nothing was about me anymore, I
Yeah.
realized that I was much happier, I was much more capable, and overall I felt much more successful. And so I feel like the number one thing that I could take away from my time out there is that, and I still apply this even now, is that I feel like anybody can gain success and happiness when we focus less on ourselves and more on other people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a great message. Were you disconnected from like, I don't want to say the grid, but like social media, or like how did you
Oh
keep in
yeah.
touch with people? Yeah, completely.
I didn't. Yeah, completely. I had email, and I
Wow.
was only able to look at it every Monday. Um,
Once a week, you can
yeah.
look at your
Oh
email.
yeah. Once a week. I couldn't look at my email during the week. So if anybody wanted to contact me, they had to do it Mondays, and you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
if they would hit me up on like a Wednesday, I couldn't call them or talk to them until Monday. And for the first like year of my time there, I could only call my family every like once every 6 months.
That's
But then for the last 6 months of my mission, I could call them every Monday. But even so, I couldn't
yeah.
call them throughout the week. So I was completely disconnected from social media. I didn't have an Instagram or Facebook.
Mhm.
I couldn't use any of that. I couldn't go watch YouTube videos either. Like I was just, I would read books, I would study,
Yeah.
and I think a large part of the reason why is because we were expected to do what we could to focus on what our task was. It was service, it was teaching others and stuff like that, which honestly, like, I thought was kind of cool, because it was really nice to get away from
I
how busy
bet.
the
Yeah.
world was. It was super nice to be able to get away from like how busy like life was like on social media, and I had no distractions, and I was never stressed either, which is great, because I would like have like
Yeah.
a full schedule and wake up every morning at like 6:30 and just be on the grind all day, but I was totally fine,
Wow.
because I didn't have no bulky phone to like distract me at all.
Yeah. Was there anything that you missed while you were there that you didn't realize until like a good amount of time afterwards? Like
Yes.
any big
Yeah.
events?
So when I got back, I felt really disassociated with like what was going on, because there were a lot
Yeah.
of like I got back in like 2019, and I was like, who's Billie Eilish. I was like, who is this? And I had no idea my life. And I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I guess she's popular. Like during my time, like, there were a lot of like events that happened, like a lot of concerts that I wish I could have gone to, and just a lot of things that like pertain to like social media and like music that I missed out on. But
Yeah.
like I really missed music when I was there because I wasn't able to listen to like, you know, the kind of music I usually listen to,
Yeah.
aka rap and hip hop, because I like that kind of stuff, or just rock in general, anything really. And so I was really excited to come back and start listening to like music again. And so yeah, and so that was fun, but it's really weird when you come back and everything is just, you know, so new again, you know? It's
Yeah.
like
How do
you
you
go back to
even
the same
start?
world that you were. I mean, like you go back to the same world that you were once a part of, but now you're so distanced from it that you have to find your way to get back into it and just get used to it again. And so it took a long time. It took me like a good 4 months to actually freaking figure myself out. I couldn't talk to girls. I was so
Yeah.
awkward. I was like, what am I doing? I was like, what do I say to you? Hi, how are you? Like, I don't know. I just felt so weird. But after
I
enough
cannot
time, it
imagine.
just got more and more normal. Yeah.
Did you this is kind of unrelated, but were you back in touch whenever you figured out that Connor was like TikTok famous? Or in his terms,
Uh,
TikTok famous?
no, yeah, actually, so Connor got TikTok famous, and I was like, he would tell me about it, every Monday or so for like the last 4 or 5 months of my time out there, and I was like, no way, dog. But yeah, like I got back, and he was, yeah, I thought it was really funny because I had no idea what TikTok was.
That
Yeah.
must
So
be crazy to hear.
I get back, and I'm like, so TikTok, huh? I was like, is it like Vine? And
Pretty
because
much, you got it.
yeah, because like I knew that Vine had been canceled or whatever, or like had been shut down.
Yeah.
And so I was like, TikTok, and Connor was like, just download it. And I was like, I did. And I don't know. I'm happy I did. It was freaking funny. Um, but yeah, I had no idea what that meant because Connor would tell me all these things, and I'm like, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Another big thing that I forgot about just until now was like all memes, like all of them, they made no sense. I had no idea what memes
Oh
were.
wow.
Like, because like I was still stuck on like, oh man, like what were some popular memes from like 2017? Think
I don't
about
like
it. Like,
Harambe.
yeah, imagine like going away for 2 years and just like living in an entirely different planet, and then coming back and having to like be familiar with all of like the internet jokes that are out there. You
Jeez,
know what I
you
mean?
were like really in
'Cause
touch with them, if I remember too. Like you had good meme
yeah, I
taste.
really
Like
was.
very.
I really was. And so I come back and I'm like so out of it. I'm like, I don't know what this means. And Connor's like, look at this. This is funny. And I'm like, I don't understand it. And he's like, oh, like you had to be here in 2018. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Like,
That's like.
and so it's funny, like what happens in like,
Jeez.
you know, what happens in the internet community after only a couple of months. And I'm gone for 2 years.
Yeah, you're
So
absolutely right. I never even thought about it like that. So that must have
yeah,
been quite the shock. So was there a bigger culture shock going to Czech Republic and Europe, or coming back to the States, you think?
coming back,
Really?
100%. Yeah. So going there, it was weird, but it took some time to, you know, I mean, I feel like after enough time, I was acclimated and I was okay. Right.
Yeah.
Coming back was very different. And I think the reason why is because when you go there, you have people who can relate to you. You have people who
Yeah.
know what it's like, and like they just understand that you're new and that like they pretty much know how you're feeling, right? They're like, we get it. So hear me?
Oh yeah, I got you now. I
Can you
got
hear
you
me
now.
now?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll just repeat what I was saying.
Yeah.
Coming
Going back.
home,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, going back, nobody understood what I experienced, and
Yeah.
nobody understands, you know, like what I'm going through, and so there's nobody to kind of walk me through it.
Yeah.
I'm almost entirely on my own, and so I am responsible for figuring my own life out. You know, I can't depend on other people, and so it's just entirely on me to kind of acclimate myself back into my environment. Whereas going out there are people who understand what you're going through and they can help you
Yeah.
walk through it. You know what I mean? So that was the hard part about it, you know?
Yeah. So a part of the church, is there any resources for people who are coming back and dealing with those issues
Oh,
in particular?
tons.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the church is super helpful, and like, you
Yeah.
know, like they're but like another big thing about our church that I've always really appreciated is they well, how do I kind of explain it? Like I feel like the church is very kind of what's the right word I'm looking for? when it comes to personal growth, like church, and I feel like this is just and like the way that I experienced it, but there are always people that you can reach out for, and there always have been. But at the same time, you know, I feel like church leaders and things like that will give us adequate opportunity to figure out, you know, like to figure out life for ourselves, which I've always really appreciated, because sometimes, you know, like we will be in positions where like we won't have other people to help us out. And you know, yes, obviously there are resources that we can have and like reach out to. But at the end of the day, like sometimes we just need to figure ourselves out. And that's kind of what it just came down to, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like it was difficult for me, but I wouldn't have wanted somebody to walk me through the process of coming home, because sometimes the best way to learn is to teach yourself, you know? And so, yeah, naturally, like I had church leaders that I could go and talk to, and I had friends that I would call, and like I had support, you know?
Yeah.
And although my family didn't really understand what I was coming back from and like what I was acclimating myself to, I still had tons of opportunities, and I still felt loved and appreciated, you know?
Yeah,
So
that's great.
yeah.
Were you ready to leave after those 2 years? Were you like, I want to get
Most
back to the
definitely.
States? Yeah.
Yeah, most definitely. Like, well, see, I think it's because like I had always I always knew that like it was just a 2-year experience,
Yeah.
right? So as those 2 years were approaching slowly and slowly, like as it got closer to that deadline, by the time the deadline came, I was like, okay, I'm ready for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I had understood previously that it was just a 2-year service, you know? And
Yeah.
so when those 2 years came, I guess my brain was like, yep, it's ready. Yeah, it's time essentially. You know, like my service is up. Yeah.
Did you make like real formidable friendships and relationships there
I
that
did.
yeah.
I really did. And I'm still talking to a lot of the people that I met. In fact, most of my friends, other than, you know, my current roommate and like my girlfriend, for example, like, but like most
Yeah.
everybody else in my life who I've met over the years, they're all from those 2 years, all of them.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
we still do things together, and like I'll still call them up and we'll still hang out. And so I've made some seriously like super like lifelong friendships for real.
That's awesome. That's a great experience. I know there's a lot of challenges that definitely came with it, but
Oh, for sure.
you hear
Yeah.
it
But
all.
like with all the challenges, like I wouldn't take it all back for a second, you know?
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't have made any other choice. Like I'm happy I went, and it really like helped me to figure out like where I'm going and who I am and what I want to become specifically.
Yeah, that's really important. Whenever you tell people now, like where you're coming from, is it hard for them? Like, what's the reaction? They're really like, yeah, I spent 2 years there. And then before that, I was in Japan, fun fact. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, like I consider myself to be a fairly reserved person. When people
yeah.
ask me like where I'm from and like, where I've been, like I don't know, like I kind of explain it like when people are like, hey, where are you from? I'm like, oh, like my dad's in the military.
Yeah.
And usually they're like, oh, okay. And I'm like, yeah, so that means everywhere. That means all over the place.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's difficult to explain to people like where I've come from and like where I've been, but I do my best. And like I
Hmm.
usually just give them like a very watered down, short, easy answer. And if they want more context, I'll fill them in. You know,
Yeah.
I'll tell them about it. So it's a good conversation starter for sure.
Yeah. So you mentioned, obviously being a military kid, that's what my podcast is actually all about. Not sure if you knew
Yeah.
that, but is there anything that you learned from being a military kid over those 18 years that you think helped you, or is this just a completely different beast?
No, I feel like there was a lot that helped me. So a lot of the guys that I ended up going out with,
Hmm.
like when it came to us leaving and going to the country, they had never left their hometowns before. In fact,
Yeah.
like the farthest any of them. And so being the only one out of 6 of us to ever leave the country or to have lived outside of the country for a while, them had never been on like an actual plane before. So I felt like I was like a good resource for them if they had any questions or concerns, to kind of let them know like how it works.
Yeah.
Like, oh, don't worry, like. And I remember having to walk them through like the process for like checking in your baggage and like going through TSA.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's not that hard. Like I was like, don't bring liquids. It's like, don't, you know what I mean? I kind of
Yeah,
walked them
it
through the process
seems
of
so
it.
natural.
Yeah, but like my experience overseas really helped me to know how to, I suppose like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like reestablish myself in a new
Hmm.
culture, because as Americans we have our own culture, as you know, and in Japan, for example, they have a very different culture,
Very
right?
different.
And if you're familiar with like what it's like to be in Japan, then you're familiar with like certain Japanese customs, just to be polite,
Yeah. Hmm.
right? Now, a lot of people who've never left their home country don't realize that other cultures have very different mannerisms that they consider rude or that they consider polite, in terms of anything really, how they speak, how loud they speak, how they eat, everything, you know.
Yeah.
And so, being in Slovakia, I had to recognize very quickly what their culture was and how it differed from my culture, you know, which was
Yeah.
easy for me to acclimate myself to. But for a lot of them, they were just like, "What is going on? Like, why are they so mean?" Like, no, they're not mean. Slovaks are
Yeah.
very straightforward people. They're a very straightforward, very like straight to the point kind of people, and that's always how it's been, and that's just their culture, you know.
Yeah.
So that helped
Was there
for sure.
was there any perception of them towards Americans, I guess I could say, that you
Yeah.
recognized?
A lot of the older generations really did not like the U.S.
Yeah.
And that's large and due part, you know, of like, you know, like former communism and like the former Soviet Union,
Hmm.
because they were just kind of trained to not. I mean, at a very young age, they were educated that the United States was, you know, this capitalist evil, and that, you know,
Yeah.
like, you know, Eastern communist Europe has no part in that. And so I would get comments all the time like, "Oh, you're Americans? Like America is the worst country in the world."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay,
Pretty
well, that's
straightforward.
great.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it." And I was like, "Have you ever been to the US?" They're like, "No." And they're like, "I don't want to go." And I was like, "Well, how do you know?" It's like, "I've seen it on the TV." Like, "Oh, on your Russian state-controlled media?" Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
That's
Um,
funny.
so, but like a lot of the younger generation really love the US. They're like, "Oh yeah," like a lot of them would like study English.
Yeah.
And a lot of them, and so it was just kind of like this like big contrast between those who didn't like the US and those who really just couldn't care for it at all. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So the younger generation, did they have like a lot of love for like American culture as well, like American music and
They
stuff like that?
did,
Because I know
yeah.
in Japan there's a little bit of that.
Yeah, I had a lot of friends who were my age, you know, like at the time, like 20 and 22,
Yeah.
and they really, you know, like they loved spending time with us as American missionaries because they were able to practice their English with us, and we were literally just like American teenagers, like walking around. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They loved spending time with us, and like although they had never been to the U.S. before, like they were super interested in like our culture, and you know they just wanted to be a part of us, which was always really cool. You know what I mean? Like one of my friends, her name is Anna. I always called her Anichka. She loves learning English. She loves hanging out with with us Americans, and that was always really fun. So
Yeah.
and, yeah, but I mean, and there were a lot of older people who really loved the U.S. But I'd say like a majority of the old people were like, "Mm-mm, I don't want anything to do with the United States." Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
but as
That's
missionaries, we didn't
quite the
talk about
contrast.
politics.
Oh, that
You know?
wasn't.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, Dane, I really appreciate you doing this, man. I know that's kind of like a lot of it in a nutshell.
For sure,
I
man.
know there's probably a lot more details that
No, it's all
could have
good.
gone to. It's still a really cool thing to talk about, and those are the type of experiences that I'm sure a lot of people will love to hear about, and also they're important experiences for you going forward. I think you obviously already know this, but equip you better for your
Mhm.
future, and incredibly unique stuff. Like beyond just being a military kid, to do something like that is
Yeah,
super
sure.
cool. So yeah, once again, thank you. I can't wait to put this together and have people take a listen.
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah.
Yeah, best of luck going forward.
Thanks, Shannon. I appreciate it.